Silence. A cave. The same prophet who called down fire from heaven now wants to die. What if Elijah had stopped there? What if the greatest prophet of fire had ended his story in darkness? Because sometimes, those who win public battles, losing silent wars. Before continuing, leave a like. This video might be exactly what someone needs to hear today. Elijah did not fall before Jezebel. He fell after the victory. This reveals something profound. Spiritual burnout doesn't only come from failure. Sometimes it comes after success. Today you will understand. Why did Elijah ask for death? What God did not do at that moment? And how the restoration began before the response. Stay until the end. Because this story is not about Elijah. It's about you. While watching, write in the comments. God still speaks to me. The fire hasn't even cooled down on the altar yet. The smoke of victory is still rising. The people still shout that the Lord is God. And even so, Elias runs. This is the first shock of this story. The prophet does not flee before the confrontation. He runs away afterwards. Chapter 18 ends no spiritual boom. Chapter 19 begins with an emotional breakdown. Elias has just experienced the greatest public miracle of his life. Heaven answered his prayer. The impossible happened before everyone's eyes. But now, alone, he receives a simple message. Jezebel wants you dead. And that was enough. Not because Elijah was weak, but because Elijah was empty. Here's a truth that almost no one talks about. Spiritual victories do not make us immune to burnout. Sometimes they speed up. Elijah spent it all on the altar. He spent his faith. He wasted his courage. He squandered his authority. He expended emotional energy. He won away. But she didn't have time to recover internally. That is why he does not confront Jezebel. He runs to the desert. It's not fear of the enemy. It's exhaustion from the journey. This text teaches us something profound. Not all silence following a victory is peace. Sometimes it's exhaustion in disguise. Elijah did not fall into sin. He did not fall into idolatry. He did not fall into disobedience. He fell to the limit of human limitations. And here's the point that connects directly with you. How many times have you won important battles? And then, did you feel too weak to continue? How many times did he do what God commanded? And instead of joy, did he feel a strange emptiness? This is not a lack of faith. It's untreated wear and tear. Elias runs all day long. Then another one. Until I sit under a tree and say, enough is enough. This phrase doesn't originate from failure. It stems from exhaustion. And here comes the most powerful part of the text. God does not interrupt Elijah before he reaches the cave. God allows the way. Allows for fatigue. Allow for silence. Because before restoring the prophet, God will reveal the state of the soul. Public victory pushed Elias to his private limits. And the next scene will not be an altar. It will be a cave. It's there in the dark, far from the fire. That's when the story takes a different turn. Because the next topic doesn't involve confrontation. Talk of collapse. It doesn't speak of glory. It speaks of humanity. And it is inside this cave that God begins to deal with that the fire never touched. The cave is not just a physical place. She is the portrait of the soul when its strength is gone. Elijah enters there not to hide from Jezebel, but to hide from himself. The prophet who confronted kings now avoids questions. The man who spoke in God's name now only wants silence. Because when burnout sets in, even faith needs a break. Inside the cave, Elijah does not prepare a sermon. Don't pray for fire. Don't ask for directions. He's asking for it to end. That's enough, Lord. Take my life now. This is one of the most shocking prayers in Scripture. Not because it's irreverent, but because she's too honest. And here is the point that captures the heart of the listener. Elias is not blaspheming. He is admitting to being tired. It's not for lack of trying. It's not a loss of purpose. It's accumulated emotional overload. And God listens. But notice what God does not do. God does not correct him. Don't reprimand him. It doesn't mention Carmel. It doesn't say, "Remember the fire." Because someone who is exhausted doesn't need nagging. It needs care. Then God does something profoundly human. He tells Elijah to go to sleep, then tell them to eat, then send him back to sleep, and then eat again. Before any spiritual talk, God deals with the body. This reveals a principle that many ignore. Sometimes what you call a spiritual crisis. It's simply unrecognized exhaustion. The cave is not a place for rebellion. It's a place of collapse. And collapse isn't solved with speeches. It can be resolved with presence. Elijah did not emerge from the cave healed. He left supported by others. Because God doesn't speed up processes when the soul is wounded. He slows down. Here is the silent lesson. God does not demand strength from those who are broken. He offers care. But the cave has not yet fulfilled its entire purpose. Because after the rest, after the food, after the silence, God asks a question. What are you doing here, Elijah? This question is not an accusation. It's an invitation. An invitation to look inward. An invitation to name the pain. An invitation to emerge from your emotional hiding place. And Elias responds by repeating the same pain, the same complaint, the same weight. This shows us something profound. Resting doesn't solve everything. It nourishes, but doesn't completely cure. There is still something trapped inside the prophet's heart. The cave revealed the collapse. Now God will reveal the method of restoration. And the next move won't be noisy. It will not be public. It won't be spectacular. Because the God who sent fire on Carmel, now he will approach a weary prophet in a completely different way. The next topic does not discuss external earthquakes. It speaks of an inner encounter. It doesn't talk about visible power. She speaks in an almost imperceptible voice. It's right there, just past the cave, that Elias will discover. God also speaks. When everything seems too quiet, Elias leaves the cave expecting what he has always known. Strength, impact, visible manifestation. Because that's how his story with God was built. God who closes the heavens. God who sends fire. God who answers loudly. Then the scenario changes. A strong wind tears through the mountains. Stones break. The ground is shaking. But the text insists on saying something strange. The Lord was not in the wind. Then comes the earthquake. Bang. Instability. Everything moves. But the Lord was not in the earthquake. Then the fire. The same element as Carmel. The symbol of Elias' greatest victory. And again, Scripture insists. The Lord was not in the fire. This is one of the most perplexing moments in the Bible. Because God is revealing himself. But not in the way expected. And here's the key to this scene. God does not repeat methods when the soul is wounded. The prophet who was exhausted. It didn't need any more impact. I needed security. Then, after all that, comes something almost invisible. A whisper. A soft and delicate voice. And when Elijah hears, he covers his face. Do not cover your face in the fire. It does not cover earthquakes. It doesn't get covered in the wind. He covers it in a whisper. Because God was there. This reveals something powerful. God speaks loudly to multitudes, but speaks softly to weary hearts. The same God who answers with fire. He also knows how to speak carefully. Here's the lesson that will captivate anyone who listens until the end. When God changes the tone, it's not absence. It's adaptation. Elias didn't need to be impressed. It needed to be restored. That is why God does not shout. It doesn't accelerate. Don't pressure me. He approaches. And the question returns. What are you doing here, Elijah? Now, unlike the first time, the question comes wrapped in presence. God doesn't want information. Wants a relationship. Because whispering is not just a way of speaking. It's a method of healing. It is God saying, I'm still here. Even when you don't feel strong. Even when there is no fire. Even when everything seems too weak. And this challenges a dangerous belief. To think that God is only where there is noise. Sometimes, silence is not abandonment. It's intimacy. Elias discovers something that changes everything. The calling did not end in the cave. The mission did not end in exhaustion. God did not come to end history. He came to reposition her. And then the voice, "Come in that direction." Because when God restores from within, He's preparing to continue working from the outside. The next step will not be rest. It will be sent. God will show Elijah that there are still kings to anoint, processes to start, and someone to continue the legacy. The whisper was not the end of the ministry. It was the turning point. And the next topic reveals something crucial. God does not discard weary prophets. He raises them up and repositions them for a new era. After the whisper, there is no end. The call comes again. This is one of the most powerful moments in this entire story. Because God doesn't say to Elijah, "Rest forever." God says, "Go back the same way." This changes everything. If God were disappointed, He would have ended His ministry there. If fatigue had thwarted the purpose, the story would end in the cave. But God does the opposite. He entrusts a new mission to a weary prophet. And this reveals a powerful truth. God does not cancel callings because of burnout. He addresses the burnout so that the calling continues. God commands Elijah to anoint kings. God commands Elijah to separate Elisha from him. God commands Elijah to return to the road. There is no long speech. There is no emotional burden. There is a clear direction. Because when God restores from within, He restores meaning from the outside. And note something essential. God doesn't ask Elijah to prove anything. He doesn't ask for another Carmelite monastery. No more asking for fire. He asks for simple obedience. Normal steps. Practical actions. Movement. This teaches us something profound. True restoration doesn't happen when we feel strong, but when we get back on track. Elias doesn't return full of energy. He returns with renewed purpose. The text does not say that Elijah never felt tired again, but it shows that he wasn't paralyzed. Because God does not demand emotional perfection. He supports continuity. And then comes a detail that connects everything to future generations. Elisha enters the scene. God not only restores Elijah. God is preparing continuity. Elisha does not appear on Mount Carmel. It emerges after the cave. This is too profound to ignore. It means that some of the greatest legacies, they are born after our weakest moments. If Elijah had stopped at the cave, Elisha would never have been called. Miracles would never have been multiplied. The story would have been interrupted. But God acts differently. He transforms tiredness into transition, pain in transition, the crisis on the bridge. Elias doesn't finish the story alone. He hands it over. This reveals the heart of God. The kingdom does not depend on the strength of one man, but of God's faithfulness throughout the generations. And here's the hook that holds it all the way to the end. Elijah's impact doesn't end with Elijah. What does God do after the cave? It reaches people the prophet never imagined. And the last topic will touch on exactly that. What would have been lost if Elijah had given up at that moment? Because sometimes, when we think about giving up, we don't realize who we're interrupting. The next chapter isn't just about Elijah. It speaks of the unseen consequences of perseverance. And that's where the final question becomes inevitable. What if Elijah had given up? What might the heavens have left unsaid? Now the question that runs through this whole story reaches its most sensitive point. What if Elijah had given up in the cave? Not as a theory, as a reality. If Elijah had stayed there, the sky would have lost its continuity. Elisha would never have been called. The cloak would never have been thrown. Miracles would not have been multiplied. But the impact goes beyond what appears in the text. Without Elijah's perseverance, kings would have remained without confrontation. Systems would remain corrupt. People would never be reached. Because giving up rarely affects only those who give up. It affects those who come after. And here is the truth that keeps you hooked until the very last second. When someone abandons the calling, the damage is not just personal. It's generational. Elijah didn't know this in the cave. He only felt tired. I just wanted silence. I just wanted to stop. But the sky was writing a bigger story, more than the discomfort of that moment, and that connects directly with you. How many times have you thought about quitting, without considering who would be affected by its continuation? How many more people need to hear something only you can tell, to see something that only you can experience, receiving something that only you can give? If Elijah had given up, the Bible would have fewer miracles, less hope, fewer examples of restoration. But he didn't give up, not because he was strong, but because it was sustained, and that changes everything. Elijah's story doesn't end in the fire. It doesn't end in the cave. It ends in continuity. He doesn't die in the desert. He is not ruled out. He is taken away. This reveals something powerful. God does not lead his servants from weariness to forgetfulness. He leads from weariness to eternity. The cave seemed like the end, but it was just a transit point. And here comes the closing that seals everything. If Elijah had given up, heaven would have missed a story. But because he continued, we gained a testimony. This teaches us that staying isn't about feeling strong. It's about trusting that God is still writing. Perhaps you are in a cave right now. No fire, without raising your voice, without enthusiasm. But that doesn't mean God has stopped acting. Sometimes, silence is the interval before the next mission. And before we conclude, let this question resonate. What can still be born? What if you don't give up today? If this message resonated with you, write in the comments, I'm not going to give up in the cave. Like and subscribe. And share this with someone who needs to hear it. Because stories don't end with exhaustion. They end when someone decides to stop. And today you were remembered that there is still a way to go.